So far what we've looked at in Tailwind is the styles, how to work with styles, the syntax of Tailwind, along with breakpoints and positions. So what we want to do is ramp up the CSS styling a bit further now. So what we will do is work on this hero banner here. So as you can see, there's a lot going on there. If we go into the dark mode, you can see here there's a grid that is being overlaid as well as a gradient color here, along with images being rendered in columns, so 3 columns here, and then we also have the text sitting on top of everything and also a button. So now that we have the basic understanding, this is the more advanced section. So this is where we would understand how to do all of this and more. So let's go ahead and get started with the hero banner. So let's go into our code. So if we go into our home page here, so the home page, we have the header being rendered, that's fine. Now what I want to do is render the hero banner. So that is what we will do next. And then we also have the product. So that will be the last thing we do, but that will be more to tailor towards the grid element. So if we do the hero banner, what I'm going to do is create a hero module. So let's go ahead and create this. So if I go into my modules, I'm going to create a new folder called home. And in here, I'm going to create another folder called hero. And in here, I'm going to have multiple components, but first of all, it's going to be index.tsx. So now RAFCE, and this is called the hero banner, like so. So now if I save this, all I need to do is import it in here on the home page. And then what I want to do now is I've got the div. So let's get started with the hero banner. So first of all, I have an SVG. So this is the grid that we've looked at, which is these lines over here. So essentially what happens is I want to layer it up. So we have a few layers. We have the background color, we have the SVG, and then we have the content sitting on top of everything. So the text and the images are the last layer of content that we will add on. So let's add the grid on first of all, and this will have a set height. So as you can see, it goes up to about here. So let's go ahead and implement that. So essentially, this is going to be an SVG that we have. So all I can do is bring in the SVG in this div here. But before I do that, I'm going to create another div inside. So this div is position of relative. So class name, and this is going to be relative. And we're also going to have isolate on there. So if we hover over isolate, this basically means isolation of isolate, and this is position of relative. So now inside here, what I want to do is bring in the SVG of the grid that I have. So let's paste that in. Essentially what it is a SVG image that has the absolute class within the relative div that we have. It's got the insert x of 0, a top of 0, a z index of -10. So the SVG itself is going to sit behind everything. A height of 64 rem, so that's how high the hero banner will be. A width of full, so it's going to go all the way across. A stroke of gray 200, and then we also have the mask image, which essentially is a radial gradient. So it's going to add this gradient onto the image itself. And then defs, anything within the defs and the SVG, it basically is the pattern that we see before us. So let me save this. And now you can see the lines. So we have lines in here. If I just hover over it further. So this is the SVG here, and it covers the entire thing. So from the header all the way down, as we mentioned, the height is 64 rem. So now what we want to do is add extra gradient behind this, similar to this one here. So let's go ahead and do that. So back in the hero banner, I'm going to close this SVG image. So this is the grid SVG. And then underneath here, I'm going to add the colored gradient. So this is the colored gradient next. And what I'm going to do is create a new component for this. So this is the gradient. And in hero, in our modules, I'm going to create a new file called gradient.tsx, RAFCE. And then now we have the gradient component in here. All I want to do is we want an outer div and an inner div. So this one's going to have a class name, and this gradient is going to be absolute. So if you remember, the outer div in here is of relatives. So here, I'm just going to import this as well. So this is going to be absolute. And then we're going to have a left of half. So left dash half, like so. So basically it's going to move from the left 50%. And then we're going to have a right of 0. So if you look at the image on the final build, you can see here left of 50%, but it's going to stick to the right of the page, as you can see there, the gradient itself. So right of 0, and then a top of 0 as well, because we want it to stick to the top. We're going to have a z index again of minus 10, so minus z dash 10, like so. And then we also want a minus margin left, so a minus margin left of 24. And then transform GPU. So if we hover over transform GPUs, if you look at it, it's got these styles on here. So essentially, it's got a translate 3D style, rotate and scale X, and then that's dependent on the relevant vars that you pass in, or the variables. So transform GPU. Then we want an overflow of hidden. So if it goes off the screen, that's fine. We just want it hidden. We don't want to have a horizontal scroller on there. Then we want to blur it. So there's different ones you could use. So we want to use the biggest blur possible. So blur 3XL, which again is this class name here. And then for large screens, what we want to do, so let's go in the large screens. We want a margin left of 24. So this is large screens and above. And then for extra large screens, we want a margin left again, but this time it's going to be 48, like so. And then also we want a area hidden of true. Right, so that's the outer div complete. Now we need to do the inner div, but let's just check what's going on first of all. You can see a little blur here, but this will become more effective when we have the dark mode theme. So we'll add that later on, but for now, this looks fine. You can faintly see it over here. You can see here the SVG now is on this side. Now what we want to do next is the inner div. So let's go ahead and fill in the inner div. And all I'm going to do is bring in the aspect itself. So what I'm going to do now is bring in the inner div in here and save. So essentially what's happening is it's giving us an aspect ratio of 801 divided by 1036, a width of 50 rem, a background image, which is a linear gradient from this color here to this color here, and then an opacity of 30. So now if I save all, and if we go into our browser, you can see now it's quite apparent there is a blue gradient appearing here, and then the rest is showing up as well. So we have 2 layers on there showing. So that is the light mode section. So as you can see, we have the grade and so on. And now what we need to content. So this text section here on the left, and then the image container on the right. So let's go ahead and do that. So if we go back into the hero banner over here, what I want to do is add the comment in here. So this is the content on top. And in the content on top, I'm going to create a div. This div is going to have a class name, and this class name is overflow hidden. So anything that gets overflowed on both is hidden, like so. And then inside here, what I'm going to have are 2 inner divs with our containers on each side. So if I just comment this out and save, we have inner div here of MX Auto. So that's an MX Auto with a max width of 7XL. We have a PX of 6, a padding bottom of 32, which is 8 rem, and a padding top of 36. And then on the small screens, it's 60. And then you also have your breakpoints here. So that's the outer div. And then on the inner div, we have MX Auto and all of these other styles in here. And then what we want to do now is render out 2 divs. So div 1 is the text container, and then div 2 is the image container. So let's just map it out so we can see what's going on in our code. So now you can see we have the text and the image, but as we expand and fill it out, these 2 will separate into their own sides. So what we'll do now is build out the text container. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to delete this, and instead of the comment here, I'm going to Command X and paste it in here. And then what we need to do is create the file. So text container.tsx. So as you saw before on the browser, they are sitting on top because the other two layers that we have put are on a -Z10. So that's how they are sitting on top. So in the text container, I just need to bring the text down a little bit. So you can see here it's at the top, whereas in the final build, it's over here at the bottom. So we just need to give it a bit of padding and so on. So let's go ahead and do that. So the text container has a div. This div will have a class name once again, and this is of relative, and the width is going to be full, and we're going to give it a max width of XL. So this is the max width it's going to go to, which is 36 rem. And then on large screens, what we want to do is we want to shrink it down to 0. So shrink 0, which essentially means that flex shrink down to 0. So this is the class here. On extra large screens, we want a max width of 2XL. So that's the outer div. What I want to do is bring in the text. So let me just bring that in. And these are essentially H1 of text for XL, the red text, font bold, letter spacing of 0.025 EM. And then on small screens, the text is going to be a bit larger. And then this is the text here for the P tag. So all I need to do is import this in. And now if I save all, the text now should be aligned correctly. So as you can see, that's all correct. All it needs now is to be brought down a little bit, but we can do that later on. So what will then happen is when we implement the images on the right, this should drop down and fall into place as well, like the final build over here. So the only thing missing now on the text container is the button. So because we already built the button previously, so the reusable button, all I'm going to do is import that in, and essentially this is going to have the text prop of show more, and the type is just going to be the button. So type is equal to a string of button, and all we need to do is close it off. And what I want to do is make the button half the width of the text container above. So I can wrap it in a div and give it a class name, and the width is going to be half, and we're also going to have a margin top of 4, like so. So now if I save all and go into the browser, now we can see that's the left-hand section complete. What we'll do next is work on the image columns over here, and then that should complete the